It's a Wednesday wisdom.
Yeah, America.
Yeah, I'm Mama.
You can find wisdom wherever you look.
Come, visit my garden. What is a wisdom? My wife.
You're all a bunch of losers.
Here we go.
Troopers, we're back. Now, we are here to talk about Wednesday wisdom whilst we sit in a bus. And I have a beautiful cup of tea. Now, here's an interesting observation, and I will tell you in a sec when I bring everybody live. Yes, we are now live on Periscope as well. So hello, Periscopers, and hello, YouTubers. Always a pleasure to see you. So, this tea came from a shop that was closing, and because it's now 10 p.m. here on a very hot Sunday evening, which of course defeats the purpose of Wednesday wisdom, you might think. Anywho, Alpha Dog, good to see everybody. The person who, one person said, sorry, we're closed. And so I left to go find another shop. I heard arguing between that person and the other person whom I remember quite a while ago. And I remember this person. Why do I remember this person? Well, this person, after yelling to the other guy who told me we're closed, actually said, brother, come back. He calls me back and he said, we can do it for you. And then the guy that argued with him said to me, I seen you in the bus. You were here before, right? Yeah, come. Anytime, man, anytime. Now, I don't know why well, you might wonder why is that interesting. I'm not sure. To me, that was interesting because trying to understand human behavior is a very fascinating thing to me. And it seemed to be that the key driver for the other person was to make sure that everyone felt welcome in their store. And so perhaps that person is correlating the appreciation of guests with success as compared to all of the other stores that are around this place offering tea, maybe even better tea, I'm not even sure. So I don't know, I found that quite interesting, and in the end he gave me the tea, and that's why I remember him. And the last time I was here was about 6 months or a year ago. I still remember that guy. I went straight to that place. He didn't remember me, obviously. So anyway, that's the story of the introduction to Wednesday Wisdom. Boom! All right, so we've put in some music there. on the YouTube version, there'll be some music. Hey, buddy.
Are you going back to Reesby, bro?
No, I'm not going anywhere, buddy.
How long to the Reesby bus?
I couldn't tell you. I'm just a standby. The buses are on the other side. Yeah.
The ones going to Reesby come on this side?
Nothing comes on this side. It all goes on the other side. Sorry, buddy. Cheers, all the best.
No, that's right, thanks, fella.
No worries.
No, even the buses going to Reesby and that go on the other side.
Yeah, all the rail buses are on the other side.
All right, thank you, my fella.
No worries.
Save this time, we would have sat here waiting for you.
All good, all good. Whew. That scared me. See, as a fellow traveler, bus driver and cafe worker serve people. It was collegial, very nice. Well, I have to say, last time that I was here, I did not have a bus with me. But you're right that he might have noticed that I was a bus driver. I could have been wearing a uniform last time. I'm not sure. So that's actually a good point. Once again, this is why I love talking on Periscope and YouTube. People write comments and give me another narrative, which I wasn't even thinking of, which also fits the observations. So you don't know which one is correct. Is this person focused on their business, or is it that he recognized, someone in an analogous industry? Anyway, so this scope, finally, I did not prepare that, but this scope is exactly about a natural fear that someone can have based upon trauma, because two people of Anglo-Saxon appearance with tattoos and stuff, which is exactly the type that fit the it constituted part of the trauma which happened to me as a kid. It's Wednesday. It's Wednesday in my mind, everybody. And that, of course, provides trauma. Someone's asking me, am I at work? Yes, I am at work. My job is to stand by, but I'm sitting by. That's my lame joke of the day. Cheers. Oh, that tea's hot. You would have thought I would pick that up by now. Anyway, so the natural feeling is to be apprehensive, and then to remember, as I said on part 1 of Wednesday Wisdom, that the leisurely job, you don't see me on the other days, but they make it up to me on the quiet days, which is good. Happens once a month or so. Excuse me, pause YouTube. So the decision, as we said in part one, yes, someone just said relating trauma to a physical incident can lead to accidental racism. Yes, and that was what part one was about. Exactly. And so one of the reactions that a lot of people have is that they judge themselves for having that apprehension, as opposed to realizing that the apprehension is not the racism, that's the normal lizard brain survival instinct from a past trauma. But then what I did was I spoke to them normally, and then I realized after speaking to them that they were just awesome, regular people, like really friendly and everything. And then you're like, oh, awesome, another positive memory to push myself further and further away from the memories of the youth. And I will continue to do that for as long as I can. It doesn't mean it's going to be foolproof. I'm sure that having that strategy will ultimately expose me, pardon any unintentional pun there, to someone who might actually have an agenda. Just downstairs now, I was waiting to go to the bathroom, and some sociopath, narcissistic, grumpy old person decided to come in and get a bit annoying. But I was kind enough to let her know that she might have needed some mental help. So maybe she could also watch some Wednesday Wisdom. Who knows? Alrighty. So hypervigilance. This is not just related to autism, but of course my scopes are autism centric. That is, of course, what drives me. But a consequence of that is many shared variables with all of us here on Scope and on YouTube. She thanked me. Yes, she was thanking me in her own way. One of the issues with autism is hypervigilance. So sometimes I'm talking to some of my Patreons, and some of them have known this. Back when I had the car and on my Vespa, sometimes I if I'm on the on the hands-free, and I can recount to people what a specific car was doing. The fact that its rear right tire went over a lane, which means that's the type of person you need to be aware of, because they don't drive exactly to the rules. And I can tell if they were a smoker, how long their beard was, what type of shirt they were wearing, which meant that either they were blue collar or not blue collar, whether they were tired or not, so that they were going to or from work, how they held the wheel. Was it with one hand? Was it the right hand? Was it a manual car? Was it automatic? The age of the car, how long between service intervals. You can tell all of this information. It's all there, but someone with autism is going to be hyper vigilant to that information, because there's something about the brain that doesn't shut off all of the brain doesn't discriminate between what's important and what's not, or what it thinks is important with autism. Well, it probably does, but to a lesser degree. Without noticing my own shirt inside out. Exactly. So it's interesting. I actually think that the brain does discriminate, but it discriminates in a different way. So it doesn't, I think with autism, because of its lack of understanding of societal norms, because of the lack of intuitive inbuilt theory of mind, which is the ability to understand how you're perceived by other people, then you will do things that seem quirky to other people. So you might wear a shirt inside out, even though logically it doesn't actually matter, because the shirt functions as a shirt as long as it's clean, whichever way. The fact that it's inside out is defined by society, right, to a large degree, and how society treats you, and how you treat yourself, knowing what society knows about you wearing the shirt inside out. So it's a very interesting interaction between rules from the outside, but rules from yourself projected onto yourself from viewing yourself from the outside. So it's like you're your own mirror, and you reflect on yourself something that doesn't even exist without that mirror in the first place. And this idea of theory of mind is very fascinating to me. I've been trying to understand it because I did not naturally have it. I've had to learn what it means to be a smartass, what it means to be funny, what it means to say hello and engage, and what does the word engage mean. And I've had to learn these things from the ground up consciously as an adult. And so I don't know what it's like to know this intuitively. And there will be mistakes, such as, either wearing a shirt inside out, or the fact that, the shirt might be, like 15 years old or something like that, or whatever it is. I'm just going to have a little bit more tea. Alrighty. Anyway, yeah. So hypervigilance is something that someone with autism possesses, but someone who suffered trauma also has hypervigilance around whichever situation is comprised of variables that were also there in the traumatic situation to begin with. Alpha Dog just asked, do you think it's easier for me to adapt than most? According to the doctors, they have never seen anyone with autism be able to adapt at the level that they've seen me adapt. And that's probably to do with the savant section, which is intertwined with autism. Yeah. and it's related, but it's a subset of autism. So apparently up to 1 in 10 people on the autism spectrum also have savantism. And savantism can manifest in different ways. In my case, it's a very, very, very unusual version, which is that my visual memory enabled to receive visual input is actually quite low. But through my ears, it's actually quite high. And it's the short-term memory that's affected. So my ability to hold in my brain an amount of memory is up to double a neurotypical. And that, obviously there are a lot of payoffs. My brain can't do certain things that, you know, the regular neurotypical might be able to do. But it means that, for example, I can listen to an audiobook in double the speed and retain, I don't know, maybe double, maybe triple, maybe quadruple the amount of information, because it's sort of like if you want to put if you want to put high flow diesel into a truck, you can't put high flow diesel, which you know goes in at twice the speed, unless the aperture of the truck can handle that incoming information. But it means that it's going to fill up twice as fast, but even more than twice as fast, because you've got a volume problem. So the ratio of volume increase is actually more than double, I would say. I don't know the exact maths on that. The maths actually in my head are not working out, but I know from life experience that being able to learn a language in 20 or 30 hours is not a usual thing. And then teaching that language and coming across as a native to the other teachers. It's not a superior thing, because some people have conflated it with that. It's absolutely not. It's absolutely not a superior thing, because and I know this, if you read the book, you know that my experiences out of my domain of competency are unbelievably pathetically weak. So I can walk into a room with 4 or 5 people and I will come across guaranteed as not mentally completely there. And I don't mean for that to happen, but it happens. And some people who live in Australia have seen this. So they've seen me act very differently in real life, because in real life, I have to dedicate more of my brain horsepower to how to walk. And I'm trying to focus on talking to you, even though that there's a train that's actually on the tracks right now. And it's actually a lot longer than most of the trains. And it's moving at a slightly slower speed, which suggests to me I can't actually see anything. I can't see anything, but I don't know. It's suggesting to me that it's some sort of freight train, but it's just unusual. It hasn't stopped. I don't know what it is. It might not even be a train. Oh, there you go. It's a passenger train and an idling bus together. So there you go. It stuffed me up. So I was just wondering what that noise was, and it's constantly like that. So that can be debilitating if you're trying to function in social spheres. But it does give you some advantages. Some of the advantages include understanding that reporting on incidents is different from the incident's rate of occurrence. So if I gave you some information, 100 people died today. Now on its own, all you're thinking about now is 100 people dying. But if I said to you, 100 people died, but 9 million people lived, and last year in the same situation, 300 people died, all of a sudden it's a completely different perspective. Because it's not that the information I gave you I took away, it's that I've added something called a comparison. And the brain compares two things to each other. And so it actually starts to see something as a different size. Now, I can give you an example that you're all going to know about. Let's say that you go and buy a car for $10,000 or $20,000 or whatever it is. After you buy the car, you go and celebrate by buying something for $100, because $100 isn't that much money, because you just spent a $10,000 or $20,000 amount on a car. People, you have had this experience, right? Surely people have had experiences similar to this. Or if you go out to dinner, what's a bit of extra dessert? Because the brain thinks in relative terms on past experience. Exactly. So we constantly are comparing. And this is part of the hypervigilance thing. We're comparing certain situations, and our brain can trick us. And none of this is my information, by the way. This is stuff that I'm learning as much as I can to try and understand humanity. So I've had to compensate by learning all this information. And so Daniel Kahneman is a good one. He won a Nobel Prize for this, and someone else whose name I cannot remember. And he wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow, but you can read a summary, go to Wikipedia and get a summary. It's fine. It's enough for everyday movements. And he's very, very good at telling you about what the brain doesn't see And the brain, if the brain can't see something, it treats it as if it's not there. It was an advantage in the past, but it's now a disadvantage in our current society. This is why casinos make so much money, because people think of the chance of winning. They don't think of the million chances of losing. Like my nose on my face. How true is that? That's such a good point. That's such a good point. Like your nose on your face. So I'll give you an example. You go to the casino, and what you notice is that on roulette, it's like red or black, for example. And it's going, someone's picking red, like it keeps coming up red, red, red. All of a sudden, you start to see a lot of people like pigeons all start putting their money on black, right? In other words, they're all coalescing like pigeons, right? But pigeons obviously don't play roulette. And they all put their money on black. And what happens? Most of the time they lose, because the chance of it being black does not include the chance that it's going to be red or zero or double zero. So the brain doesn't see those things, and so over time they will completely, thank you for inviting, get screwed over. But the human brain does not see that, and it thinks of its chance of winning something. That's why the lotto makes so much money, for example, even though the chance of winning is less than the amount of people on the planet. But people think of that thing, and then someone says, but someone wins. So it could be me. Well, yeah, it could be. Alrighty. So car crashes was the next one. And trauma. So trauma leaves scars according to the doctor. I really feel sorry for someone just said my face reminds them of a used tampon. I really feel sorry for that orifice in which they're putting those tampons, I tell you. That's funny. Good attempt though. All right. So hypervigilance, what the doctor was explaining, was that it can arise from a traumatic event. And the traumatic event reminds you of things that you witnessed. It doesn't remind you of the things you didn't witness. So, when I was racially abused by people who looked a certain way, the brain does not remember when I was not racially abused by people who looked the same way. It only remembers the ones who did. And the way to remind yourself, the way to hack the brain into realizing that most of them did not do that to you, Captain Deltron, is to actually generate new memories, just like I did just now, which I swear I didn't set up, with guys that look like the guys that abused me. And they were the best people. So now I have a new memory. And that shows you that not all, right? And then you keep building up that memory of not all. So here is a problem I think that happens more on the I guess we can call it the liberal temperament side, the side that has a higher sensitivity to negative emotions, being entrepreneurs, people who are more of the hyper-creative side. And it's not better or worse, it's just one of the tendencies that come with having that type of temperament psychologically, according to numerous studies. It's not my own stuff, of course. Is that one can then be sensitive to the fact that they're having this negative feeling towards what they deem to be innocent people and decide to attach some sort of moral judgment to that. And that's a massive problem. So me having an apprehension towards something, like I said, we need to remember that that's a tool that the brain evolved for survival purposes, and that's all it is. And then we surpass that. So the reason that's important is because if we judge ourselves as being, if we apply a moral judgment to that natural reaction, as opposed to judging ourselves for what we do afterwards, then it becomes very easy to want to judge others who have those feelings. And there's a tendency then, according to the doc, to then be hyper-vigilant of other people appearing to be what you would call racist, when in fact it might actually be a response to a traumatic event, which is just a normal survival instinct. And it's important to try and differentiate the two. And it's hard because you're not always going to get it right. So one of the interesting things about the brain is that somewhere between 25 and 30, it becomes less malleable, something like cement becoming hardened, and your identity and personality becomes sort of set. And in a way, it might be a disadvantage because it's harder to mold one's views. But at the same time, actually, it allows one to use their own formed identity as a launching pad to be able to challenge those thoughts and challenge new thoughts that come in as it's at the same time. It's sort of like you can't jump unless you have a solid ground. And so that is an advantage of actually developing that more of a rigid structure. So your personality doesn't change as much, but your ability to challenge other views and then, of course, subsequently challenge your own actually becomes easier. So it's a bit of an irony that that's the case according to what the doc was saying. And this is why gives them traction, bingo. And this is why spending time in your own tribe can have the effect of slightly dehumanizing a member of the outside, because the brain becomes reinforced with its own views because you're hanging out with people who don't challenge the black spots in your own views. And so you both develop the same language, the same connotations, the same what they call Russell conjugates. Like I said before, there are terms like open borders, which literally have different meanings depending on where you are in the Union, in the North American continent, which some people call that nationalism. I call it continentalism, considering it's a uniting of 50 independent nation states. Myopic. You could call it myopic. That's one way to look at it. That, in my mind, that adds a moral judgment to it, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just an observation I'm making in my mind, what that appears to me to be. So what have we got here? That's why it's very easy for tribes to solidify. The more you hang out, it's much easier. It's a lot more fun, but it also makes it very difficult to become less socio and ethnocentric or tribocentric and to become more world-centric. And world-centricity is an interesting concept because when you're a child, according to Dr. Ken Wilber and many other doctors, the child is very egocentric. Well, I'm going to stop this YouTube video. It's a pleasure to see all you guys on YouTube. And until next time, don't forget to take life one smack at a time. Boom!
Here we go.